Hello and welcome to CVG's Sony E3 Preview Show. I'm Dan Dawkins and I'm joined today by Rob Crossley.
Hello.
And Tim Clark.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing what Sony should do at the conference, what they might actually do, and the mistakes they must avoid. So Tim, first question to you. What does Sony need to do at their press conference and how do you think they should do it?
I think they go into this E3 probably in as strong a position as Sony have been in for a while in terms of having their kind of ducks lined up. There's real excitement in the machine in terms of support from third-party AAA studios, and they've got the indie kind of vote sewn up. They seem to have made good headway in kind of persuading people that they're going to have an affordable but powerful machine. I think the real critical thing for them is to leverage the fact that aside from Nintendo, they've probably got the best group of in-house developers of any of the platform holders. And I think that's where they can really, if Microsoft are going to push down this kind of multimedia box route and Sony are going to take this, we're all about the games tack, then to do that they need to be leveraging the likes of Polyphony and the likes of Naughty Dog too. And I know Naughty Dog have just had a game out, but I'll be amazed if they don't have something else to show at E3. Mm-hmm. I think they really need to focus on what in-house talent they've got, because we were talking earlier, Dan, about with the machines being so similarly spec'd, the importance of getting exclusive content is now bigger than ever, and I think Sony are quite well placed to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. On your point as well, Microsoft has got the money to broker amazing third-party deals, and I'm sure they're going to announce them at E3. So what Sony has to do to sort of counteract that is to use its own first-party studios to show that it has its own exclusives that really can sell the console.
Sony are like Borussia Dortmund with great youth players coming through their own ranks, whereas Microsoft are the Bayern Munich in this confusing football analogy.
I'm liking that.
Welcome US viewers.
It's worth looking up, that's a good point. Now, we're talking about Sony's first party strength. Now, we've seen an example of that in their initial reveal for PS4, where perhaps we saw maybe some of their more underwhelming titles, I suppose. Maybe like Infamous, maybe expectations aren't as high as they could be. Killzone technically looked confident, but maybe wasn't quite the knockout innovative title we expected. What could they produce from their first party stable that would be really surprising and knockout?
I think they are actually there's a wider problem for Sony a little bit in that remember when Killzone 2 was announced for the PS3, and when God of War 2 was announced, there was this craze about those games, and I think a lot of their first party IP has lost that major appeal. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that, there's definitely an element of that, and the stuff they showed at the PlayStation reveal, your Knacks and, like Dan says, your Infamouses and Drive Clubs felt like they were kind of second tier stuff.
Yeah.
I would think they will go with the stuff that's going to be really, they're going to need stuff that's, I think, new, so I would be surprised if whatever Quantic Dream are doing Beyond isn't there. Yeah. And then there's obviously kind of a big question mark hanging over The Last Guardian and whether that comes back in a kind of next-genified.
Do you think it will?
Yeah, what's your money on?
I think it might, yeah. I mean, I remember talking to Mr. Yoshida from Worldwide Studios a while ago, and he called them the Olympic team because it takes them 4 years to make a game. And they must be pushing on more like the Stone Roses Second Coming team now in terms of analogies. I think it has to be there. I mean, if they're still persisting with the project, which they seem to be, I mean, it's up there with Rockstar's Agent in the kind of great lost games at the moment.
I mean, my feeling is, as you say, I think it's critical for them because it ticks off a few boxes. One is that it re-cements this sort of indie cool kid status as creating arty games. Two, the game had noted technical problems. Now, one way to solve that is to throw the power of PlayStation 4 in it, so it's great on that front. And it's, again, something that Microsoft definitely won't have.
What's interesting as well, sorry Rob, is that you only need to look at the response to a game like Watch Dogs and see how hungry people are for a new IP that, even if it isn't kind of reinventing gaming paradigms, but is at least a new setting and some new ideas in it. And I think that explains why there was a bit of an underwhelming response to some of the stuff shown by both Microsoft and Sony, as they felt like, other than that, there were continuations on existing franchises. So I think for all format holders, it's going to be really important to show that the next gen isn't just more of the same. And I think they may all struggle with that a little bit.
I think as well I mean, Watch Dogs is a really popular new game. There's a lot of buzz around it. But I think if there's any company that's going to have an exclusive on that, some sort of DLC or anything, it's going to be Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft are paying a lot of money for, that sort of timed exclusive and exclusive DLC packages that they have with games, and I think Sony can't counteract that so much because it has to be profitable. You know, the PlayStation business has to be profitable very quickly for the company. So what we're going to see, I think they're going to cultivate a lot of indie developers and a lot of smaller, cheaper indie developers. You know, like Jonathan Blow, like your Mike Bithels, people like that. I think they believe in how lucrative digital indie games are going to be for the future.
Dan, how much do you think they'll respond to Microsoft's kind of great home entertainment with the all-in-one box messaging? Do you think they'll respond to that and say that we can also play MKV files, so don't worry about your hooky internet videos? Is that a big thing for them?
My feeling is like they're obliged to respond to it to an extent. I think they would be wrong to throw all their energy at it. I think they've got to keep the games focused and say we are the games box first and foremost, but almost like confidently and effortlessly say, oh, and we do all this. And they can throw a slide on screen that says Netflix, Hulu, Spotify.
Yeah. Wasn't the PS3 messaging in the US? It only does everything. I mean, that was a key part of their.
Yeah, but I think that was because it was so expensive, right? I mean, with the PS2, it was fairly cheap, so they could say, hey, it plays games. But because the PS3 was like, I don't know, $599 US, they said, well, you know, you can do everything with it.
But that's a good point, Rob. Do you think Sony, we haven't talked about them showing the machine yet, I think we're all pretty certain they will show the machine, but will they talk cost? Will they talk release date?
I mean, I think price is the final thing, isn't it? They have to gauge reception, they have to figure out how much all of this costs them, putting it all together. I get the impression that we'll have to wait till after E3 for price. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it could well be Gamescom. I think I don't have them all forensically stored away, but I think from previous launches, the price has actually come quite late.
Yeah.
I'd expect the same. I think it depends again. Microsoft would have played a hand in the morning, so we'll have they might decide whether to do something.
Well, they often go in ready to respond, don't they? Like if Microsoft come out with a crazy low price, they may have to think about either hiding theirs or. If they've gone with a high price. I remember we were at E3 a few years ago, Dan, and we were told that Sony had 3 versions of their conference ready to roll out. Based on what was done earlier in the day.
Levels of escalated threat.
Do you remember that amazingly bad press conference they did before the PS3 release? You know, the giant enemy crab one?
I do, because I was sat next to Dan. I remember squeezing his leg in a sense of actual animal panic as the crab sequence played out on screen.
I thought it was excitement.
That was delayed for an hour, wasn't it, before you actually got on as well?
Hasty rewrite.
I was told by someone at Sony that it was delayed because they were rewriting everything so frantically.
Well, there's no better point than the Genji crab to talk about what Sony could get spectacularly wrong in this conference and the pitfalls they must avoid.
Well, I'll start because Sony has been on this amazing journey over the past 3 years where it's gone from this arrogant publisher, what people perceive to be a very arrogant publisher that thinks, you know, do an extra job to afford a PS3 and, you know, the next generation doesn't start until we say, and it's turned into a more modest company that I think understands consumers. And if they come out with something like $599 US for the console or something like that,
suicide.
Yeah, it'll be. I honestly think that in order to get massive headway, they need to be cheaper than the Xbox One, and they need to prove the system is better as well.
My favourite of those quotes around that sort of time was when I think Kutaragi-san said, in Europe they like drinking wine, but in Japan we like beer, and that was the explanation for why Japan got the machine for like 150 quid cheaper or something like that. Like, yeah, fine, thanks.
He was just trying to get fired, wasn't he?
Yeah, he did have enough at that point. My concern with Sony's press conferences is the same as I always have with them, really, is that they tend to have great content that they then schedule and show off really badly. Like you'll get something that's quite boring, will run for like 15 minutes, and then you'll get like a really good game sort of tossed away in like under a minute. And I hope they've learned, and I think it's often for political reasons, that to get so and so on stage they need to give him X amount of time or whatever. And I hope they've learned from that. But it was typical of it even at the PS4 reveal, when you end up seeing a Square demo that had been shown a year before. And it's all politics. So I hope they realise what they need to do, which is to deliver on that. We are going to have game experiences that you won't find elsewhere, and they're going to be pretty sexy. That's
a really interesting point. Do you think it's because they're a Japanese company? Because there's obviously that philosophy of Japanese companies, which is, when you're speaking publicly, to be a bit more regimented, to be a bit more...
I think it's more that they're a vast company. I think you see Microsoft and Nintendo make really similar mistakes in different ways. Microsoft tends to be... They're so in love with celebrity culture because I think they come from a world of geekery in terms of a programming background, that they, for them it's about getting athletes and TV stars on stage. I think they each have their own little strange Achilles heels when it comes to scheduling. Whereas Nintendo will just go... They just won't show you anything at all, and then go, "Thank you."
Well, Achilles' heels. One of the biggest things could be what they do with their DRM policy or not.
Yeah.
Now, are we expecting them to come out and announce something similar or something as muddled as Microsoft has announced?
I think they've been operating too cannily at the moment not to deal with it. I think they got away with it at the reveal by. What Microsoft's mistake was to half answer the question, which then invited more questions. Whereas Sony just blanket said, "We're not talking about this, but we will talk about it later," and that was a completely consistent line from their executives. Now, I think they know they won't get away with that a second time, getting this close to release. And my suspicion is that they will say, "We're going to completely leave it to software publishers to decide what kind of..."
no fingerprints.
Yeah, because they completely then absolve themselves of any blame, but they let the industry do what it wants.
Yeah.
Whereas Microsoft, it appears, want a cut of the transaction, which is quite a different place to be in. Now I'm sure Sony would like the money, but I think they don't want to embroil themselves in...
What's never happened publicly is none of them have come out and almost said, "This is why we want to implement pre-owned." Because it's always seen as a way of, "We want your money, we're evil coin grabbers."
I personally don't have any problem with the reason they do want it. And the reason they want it is because the industry doesn't like seeing a vast amount of the economy gurgling just into retail.
But do the public see that? Do people who buy games see it as, "I feel like I'm investing in the creative future of this company in better games"?
No, they see a £40 game that's suddenly a £10 game, and how hard is it to resist that?
Games don't devalue by being second. It's not like wearing someone else's jumper and it smells. Like this is just a disc.
Yeah.
But then there's clearly a future where this stuff works, or where people are not unhappy with it, because if you only have to look at Steam as the great sort of paradigm, and people, because the entry point in terms of price is lower and there's lots of bundle deals and stuff, people are happy with interacting with it in that way, and you don't get people going, "Oh, I wish I could gift on my copy of Dishonored so much."
If Sony want to implement a pre-owned fee of any kind, this is the perfect time for them, because Microsoft are definitely doing it, or they're definitely doing something of that kind. So, if Sony have always been tempted over the years to do this, then now's their perfect opportunity, because they won't lose any ground, so to speak.
I think it'd be interesting to see if they make any announcements with PS Plus, whether that becomes close to almost being mandatory as well, because I think that given like Sony's own fiscals, the idea of them just permanently running effectively a huge free online service starts to look less and less tenable. And PS Plus I think has been a great service. I'd be amazed if that isn't a pretty core part of what the PS4's offering is online.
We've talked about our fears for Sony. We've talked about our hopes for Sony. I mean, finally, what do we think they definitely will show? Like, what will be the reality of it?
I think it'll be strong. I mean, I think, like we said at the top, I think they'll come out with some really strong first-party stuff. I think they'll probably be weak.
What would you open the show with?
I'd have Nathan Drake doing something unbelievable, even if it's fairly bullshotty.
Even very first thing?
Yeah.
You drop the Drakey bomb.
Yeah, he's
drop the Drakey bomb.
He's by far and away their strongest internal.
Another question, because I'm actually fascinated by it, because in my mind I've created a dream lineup, and it's amazing. But
you do this every year, and this is why you get disappointed.
This is where I nudged him at the conference when he's not squeezing my leg and I'm crying at the Genji crowd.
Buy you a drink.
Yeah, I say this is where Kojima comes in on a jetpack, Tim.
Yeah, and he never comes.
He never does it. So I don't think he's going to issue, sadly. But so you dropped Drake early.
Yeah.
When would you drop the hard way?
Straight after, probably. I'll then do a little bit of preamble and then show the box.
How would you out then? What would be your big finale?
Last Guardian, surely.
Depends how it's looking.
People have been waiting for so long.
Yes, but it depends how it's looking, and it is quite art house. I'd love them to go. I was a little bit surprised, although not knowing how Polyphony works, that the next Turismo is aimed at current gen for the moment. I'm sure it will turn up eventually, but I think it would have been great to have a glorious relaunch on PS4. But I just think Polyphony move like in a kind of like a tectonic plate, don't they? And it's taken them almost this amount of time to get to grips with just this gen.
Yeah.
I mean, Rob, what's your feeling about the show?
Well, I think Sony have also got to prove that they're a third-party publisher as well. And it's interesting actually because the PlayStation meeting ended on Bungie's Destiny, right? So I get the distinct impression that they might finish off with some form of exclusive third-party PlayStation content.
Well, Destiny's
Rockstar's
interesting.
Agent, would you fancy that, Rob?
Sorry?
Rockstar's Agent, in
Yeah,
the cold?
yeah, that thing come out of limbo, definitely. Yeah,
I mean, that
I
was
don't think
announced as
that's
a
not
Sony
impossible.
exclusive, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a PS3.
It's only
exclusive,
6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was developed as a PlayStation 2 game.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
two
really?
generations later, we might find who knows.
Those textures are going to be upscaled quite heavily, aren't they?
But that's like it's in the same world as Last Guardian, isn't it? It may, if it's ever going to live, it's going to be now. Well, we know that Destiny is going to be shown on Sony's stage. That's a big deal. That's Bungie showing off their
Yeah,
big
exactly,
new
yeah.
10-year world. So that's quite potentially a coup for Sony. Are we
They'll have
expecting?
some MMO stuff?
Are we expecting anything? MMOs is a good check because that's showing a new way to play. I expect some FTP. Are we expecting anything like exclusive that is a bit surprising? Third-party exclusive.
Yeah, but I don't know what. But there will be definitely a surprise. I mean, at the PlayStation meeting, no one expected Blow to come on stage, John Blow, to come on stage to show that The Witness was going to be a kind of exclusive. He said exclusive, but it's basically not coming on Xbox One. That's,
Ever or not for a
just
bit?
for a year. So that's kind of a timed console exclusive. So I think they'll do the same thing. I think they will show something from third parties that we don't know about.
Final Fantasy, there's been some talk of that.
Yeah, that's a good shout. The Square Enix obviously are a company like Final Fantasy.
In fiscal dire straits,
Yeah.
they might want a money.
Yeah,
money
well,
hat payment.
yeah,
So-
and it's going to make a lot of sense for the Japanese market. It totally seals it up beyond
Yeah.
any doubt. It makes perfect sense. It's got some Western translation. There's also talk of at the PlayStation 4 announcement there was that Capcom game Deep Down,
yeah.
which was a bit weird, and everyone was like, "What's that?" And that was the working title. One rumor I've heard is that it is in fact Dragon's Dogma 2, which is going to be a PlayStation exclusive, and that's the
Oh,
link.
wow.
The link basically being the double D.
Also
Now-
Dan Dawkins.
Exactly. So
So
it's
the triangle is complete.
the trifecta of double Ds. Oh my life! This won't get broadcast. It's complete. Any other final words? Any dream wish for it before we go? Anything you'd really hope to show?
No, I think this is Sony's E3 to lose. I think they're incredibly well set up. I think Microsoft are slightly embattled with having to deal with the DRM stuff. I think they'll have a decent show, and like Rob says, I think they'll be strong on third parties. I think Sony will be weak on third parties because they usually are in terms of those sorts of exclusives, but I think their own internal stuff will probably make up for it. I expect them to be quite aggressive on proving that their media handling stuff is actually the equal of Xbox's, except for the TV frippery, which we can debate the importance of elsewhere. But I think Sony are very well positioned, and if they blow it, they'll only have themselves to blame.
Rob, anything to add?
I've just remembered they also have a handheld, don't they?
Good grief! I mean, that's
Someone at Sony's probably saying the same thing.
I mean, I'll throw out quickly my thoughts on the handheld. Vita, I think, is essentially going to become a feeder second screen for PlayStation 4 and little else.
Yeah, I
If they
agree, but
slash
is
the
that
price,
interesting? I mean,
for me, that's brilliant. If the family with one TV in demand, if I can take the actual game that's running on my PlayStation 4, let's say it's the next Skyrim,
okay.
Take next Skyrim upstairs on my Vita, exactly
I
as
think
it is.
I think it's a myth, that stuff,
On
and I'll
the
tell you
same-
for why. Is I've tried doing it with the Wii U, and you always wish you were on the big screen.
yeah,
It's nice. It's a cool thing.
yeah.
Okay, I think it's a cool thing. We're being told to wrap it up. No one will know. Also, let's not forget the cloud, and we'll leave it there, up in the clouds.
Of course. Right, yeah.
Please leave your comments below. There's lots to debate. I'm sure we'll be proved absolutely right and not wrong shortly. Subscribe for more shows and more show reaction. And until the next time, we'll see you soon.